much as they might get now.
Yeah, well, that's the one of the big debates when we started our first show. If doctors and people's wallets, and what health insurance companies, how much you ask for with health insurance, how much you're willing to pay for, that might determine what your care is. Is that more fair, or is it more? And will we have more people who get adequate care that way, or will we have more people get adequate care if the government determines what you're going to get? Now, people with single payer, I think, believe that under a government system that will work more, because we're such a wealthy country. We have so much money. There has to be plenty of money to spend to keep everybody healthy.
Well, we've been spending a lot of money on health care. In fact, we're told that it's a lot more than other countries spend.
Per person, per capita, whatever.
Per unit of GNP, or whatever you want to call it. And indeed we do. But what are you going to cut? What don't you want to be the healthcare system to cover for you? Do you want to say that the person who is suffering from a rare form of leukemia, for which there might be some kind of a drug, an effective drug, but it's too expensive, we're not going to provide it? We have seen that in other countries, where they simply don't provide a drug that we provide here.
Oh, yes.
Now, is that what you want? Well, that's to be determined, I think. And
I mean, it's actually pretty things we take for granted here. In Germany, if you are suffering from depression, the government won't pay for the newest depression drugs, which have fewer side effects and are great advances. You're stuck with the old things that do make you schizophrenic or whatever they do. All these side effects that were unpleasant.
Yeah.
But that's all the government will pay for. And in England, you can't get the newest breast cancer drugs because they're too expensive, and your chances of dying of breast cancer of England are so much higher than they are here. Your chances.
And that determination was made by a board.
Which is exactly what this thing sets up.
It was made by a group of people sitting around in a room and saying, well, if somebody takes this, their life will only be extended 2 months, and it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the doctor who was dealing with the patient.
And we all know that every patient acts differently.
Yeah,
but
that's
we're
right.
going to throw that out, and we're going to all fit into this sort of little standard.
Yeah.
That's how that, and that I think is where people are saying our freedoms are being eroded.
Well, that's
freedom to thrive.
And the freedom for the doctor to make the determination of what's in the best interest of the patient. And
the freedom of drug companies to know that their research, if they take a risk, which they, it takes $1 billion to get a new drug to the market, I think they say.
Or at least.
And at least, and huge failures along the way. Will they take that risk? And will our medicine advance? Those are huge questions, I think. That's
a very good question, and I think it's one that it isn't specifically covered in here, but it's certainly a consideration now on the part of Congress to say, well, what changes do we need to make in this law? Obviously there are some, but I was thinking back as I was driving over here. I remember, was it a year ago when there was a big stink about mammograms? You remember? About
they said you don't need to get them until you're 60.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that was the government. The government was going to come down on that one. Yeah.
Well, you saw what happened with that, and they backed off very fast. But here's a panel sitting around saying, well, do we really need mammograms, or is that a risk of whatever it was?
We're willing to have the statistics
a bunch
show
of men,
so much. Yeah. Men. Well, I don't know if there's a lack of women on these panels too, but again, I think it goes down into that core thing that Friedrich Hayek talked about in his book, The Road to Serfdom, which is when you have government planners sitting around determining things, the outcomes often are extremely scary.
Yes.
And very detrimental to a lot of people in the end. And I think this is why the pushback is becoming so strong on this. it's uncharted territories, and we've got the government in charge.
Yeah.
And tell me one program that they've done that's been really successful. And I would have to say the military. That's to me that's one program that has taken their lumps, misused taxpayer money when they were buying $70 hammers, and they took it and they've cleaned up their operation. That was years ago. You're still hearing about it as a criticism, but the other government agencies have not done that, taken that leap of really being accountable.
Especially in healthcare, there is this word outcomes. Now, what are the outcomes of this particular program? If we spend the money here, are we going to change people's lives? That's really one of the definitions of what's an outcome. We're going to change people's lives. How is this law, and this is a question I have no answer to, but how is this going to change people's lives for the better? In looking at this long list here, and you look at the Office of Minority Health.
Geez, where are they going to find places to put all these offices?
Composition of the office not specified. Office headed by a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Minority Health. Office is to retain and strengthen authorities, etc. It goes on, and I think, I regret very much that when Mr. Obama took office, with the mandate, he had the goodwill, he had 57% of the vote or whatever it was. He had an enormous
popularity rating.
Popularity. He had a Congress that was under his control. And in my view, if he had concentrated on the economy, let's get the economy going, and then we can deal with health care and we can deal with carbon credits and all the rest of these things. But we really need to get the economy moving. And sure, the stimulus bill was part of that. But I think he took his eye off the ball when he said to Congress, let's have a health insurance law. And then he got all balled up. Endless argument over death panels and things like that. And it diverted attention and resources, I think, to this, which could have been accomplished later when people had more time to think about it. But that isn't the way it worked, and now we have this bill, which is kind of a monster. Yeah.
Well, I think that, he went in with that huge popularity index and everything, and everybody was very excited about the possibilities that were there.
Yes.
But they also controlled Congress in a huge way, both houses. And I think they thought they could do anything. And that's why so much was on the plate, because inevitably that power, they're smart enough to know that power is hard to keep in place unless I think they sincerely believed that all these things were good for us, and then that we would continue to vote them in power because we would appreciate all this goodness coming out. And what did James Carville say? There's going to be a liberal take over for the next 40 years. It's in place, it's locked in, and now we've seen that jobs are the biggest problem.
Yeah.
And these things kill jobs.
Well, the issue is, what do we do now? We have this law, and we're going to be seeing how it works out, and it does put a tremendous uncertainty on everybody who has to deal with it, particularly businesses, but also anybody.
Well, look how many businesses are asking for waivers that they don't have to be under this law for the next 2 years, and then they'll ask for another waiver. And if you're big enough and powerful enough, you can get one. If you're some little, small operation, pay up, which means those small operations are going to go.
Yeah, but from a small business perspective, they're dealing with an insurance company. Might be Blue Cross, it might be Anthem, it might be somebody who is trying to operate under this law with the same degree of uncertainty that everybody else has, because they don't know For example, how much it's going to cost to cover students until they're 26.
Yeah, and they can't print money.
They can't print
So,
money.
you know, that's the government complains, but the government always can print money.
So now you're finding that they're raising rates in anticipation
Huge.
of
Double-digit raises.
of what these
Yeah.
things are going to cost. Now the rates have to be approved by state regulatory agencies, which are pretty gimlet-eyed on these things, and they're likely to knock them down. But on the other hand, the state's regulatory agencies have the responsibility to regulate in the public interest to see that the companies stay in business
Right,
and offer the service.
And if you force a company that they can't pay it, then they're out of business. Everybody's gonna be dumped into the government, which is what I think they want in the end anyway.
Well, then you will get another huge bill about insuring the all of this population.
Yeah, and let's talk about the enforcement of this, as we have a little time left. The Democrats have put the IRS in charge of this enforcement. Now, to me, maybe I'm just paranoid, but that just dings off bells and raises flags, because they can seize your home.
Mm-hmm.
They can seize your paycheck. Whereas now, if you're late on your hospital bill, they can't even charge you interest on it.
Mm.
You know, and they have to write these things off. You know, the government dictates they have to. So what does that say about the force behind this law that is going to be put in place? Just the idea
It's
of the
scary.
IRS.
It's scary.
And we're going to be forced to buy it, and then we're going to be forced to, whatever taxes it takes, we'll be forced to pay it.
Yes, and as you know, there's a lawsuit or several lawsuits going through about the authority of the government to force somebody to buy
A product.
insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be an argument over it, whether it's you're forced to buy or whether it's a tax. If it's a tax, there's no question that they have the authority to do it. But the way this is written, at least to some observers, is that this is a benefit that you're forced to buy. Well, you're forced to buy it as a condition of living, not as a condition of owning a car, as you are for automobile insurance. So there's this legal question, constitutional, if you will, that's working its way through, and it may throw everything into a cocked hat down the road. But I think that the fact that they got the IRS involved is interesting, in that they think people have to be forced under penalties of dire seizure and whatever, in order to get them to do this. The implication is otherwise we wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I think in Massachusetts you're also forced to buy, and that's become a nightmare. And people basically are they're quitting their jobs because they say, you know, I just can't afford to do this, or they're working. What it does, it drives the economy underground. And prove, you know, that I've made this income and at this rate, and the relationship between government and the people becomes very odd at that point. Very damaging. Thank you, Chris. We're at the end of another session, and we thank you.
Gee.
Yeah.
Just got started.
Just got started. Well, and I think with this health care bill, the government's just got started, unfortunately.
Just got started.
So we'll try to hang on for the ride. And we thank you for watching. My name is Lynn Corum. I've been your host today, and our guest has been Chris Brown. And we'll see you on our next show.